Welcome everybody. This is our monthly Western TEA or TEA Western Division educational panel. Thank you so much up front to Michael Libby for putting this one together, standing in for Kathleen Cohen, who's been shepherding our Metaverse series with Darren Brown, our principal, our president. That was a Freudian slip. Sorry, Darren. Other than that, I'm going to um, turn this over to Michael and take myself on mute.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome. I'm so glad everybody's here today. If this is your first time, thanks for joining us. This is something that we do semi-regularly. We have this technology series as part of the TEA Western Division. Gosh, we haven't done this over Zoom in a couple of years. And a few years ago, we did a whole session about the metaverse and how it was going to be the next big thing. And I think the initial pitch for this particular session was, whatever happened to the metaverse? Where did it go? And the feedback we got was, let's try and do something more positive, not so negative sounding. So the new topic is spatial storytelling, and the post-hype metaverse. So with that, I will share my screen. So yeah, guys, it's been a couple of years. There was a lot of hype surrounding the metaverse, but it definitely was a bubble. And we're going to get into why that was, what happened exactly. But I wanted to show you just a couple of articles about this first. So we've been seeing a lot of articles like this. Meta still believes in Horizon Worlds, its metaverse, but likely not for long. We hear all the time about how there just aren't a lot of users there. Meta is dumping a lot of money into Horizon Worlds, but the user base is just not showing up. And we'll talk about why that is. And just last week, we heard from Microsoft that they are shutting down their Microsoft Mesh business, or their Mesh platform, which was intended to be a virtual meeting space. Seeing some of these images might even trigger some flashbacks to the pandemic times and to the metaverse. And there was a lot of opportunity. There was a lot of curiosity about where all of this technology was going. And even Matthew Ball, who literally wrote the book on the topic, The Metaverse, has now issued a new version of the book, where he has also leaned into the spatial internet as kind of the new term. So the first question that I have for the group is, why do you think the metaverse failed? We had this whole hype cycle. Now it's kind of a toxic word. What do you folks think happened? Maybe I'll ask Don first.
I think we're really good at imagining how something's going to be and then becoming extremely disappointed that it didn't turn out to be how we imagined it. I think that all of us are probably using the metaverse on a daily basis for our work, but we're not doing it in a way that I think the people who created the hype imagined we would be using it.
Great. Would anybody else care to comment?
I mean, I would jump in. I don't think about it as like the metaverse is dead or it's not a word that I can't use anymore. I think that the what it is has evolved, right? I think the word hype is a great word because there was a time, I think, especially during COVID in the deep dark days when, we were talking a lot about blockchain and the metaverse, and now, of course, we're talking a lot more about AI. But what I think is important is that some of the principles out of that metaverse mentality are permeating the way that we do business, the way that we engage with friends, the way that we play games, the way that we socialize. Like when you think about, Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft, and when you think about just the need for the internet itself to kind of be reinvented, right? Every so many years, right? The internet kind of changes and evolves, and we're sort of on the cusp of figuring out how to make things more experiential, which I think, as the TEA, that's at our core, right? Why do we want to engage as a consumer in a way that feels so, I mean, really like archaic, right? When you can now have much more personalized, customized experiences. And so I think the way that I look at it, it isn't dead, it's just evolving. And it's going to be a really long-term thing. So it's not like we were going to get to the metaverse overnight. I think people sort of jumped onto that promise. But I think a lot of the principles that were underpinning the movement to want a metaverse still exist, but it isn't going to have like any one answer. We're not going to all jump into VR and, you know, congregate together there and not live in the real world anymore. I think it's just going to be a lot of different ways of experientially engaging and immersing ourselves in things that will come together. And some of them already exist and some of them don't exist yet, but that's really how I perceive it.
So this is what we're going to be talking about today is some of these underpinning technologies and where they are a few years later. And I think one of the things that happened, in my opinion, is that everybody jumped onto this hype train for the metaverse. And then the first thing that happened was they grabbed the lowest hanging fruit. And they took maybe a static 3D model that they already had for some existing facility, and they plopped it into a game engine and said, okay, everybody put on your VR headset and come see this. And, you know, it's not as compelling to visit a Taco Bell in VR as it is to visit a Taco Bell in real life. It's just not. You know, those were some of the kind of like earliest entries into this metaverse space when the hype was at its highest. And it probably did a lot of damage to kind of the overall perception. I think a lot of people, first of all, I think they associate the metaverse with VR first and foremost, where it isn't necessarily always VR. It can be cross-platform. And then a lot of the things that were key to the metaverse really taking off, like interoperability of assets and like object permanence and perpetuity, those things just didn't happen yet. So those of us that are working within these technologies and these spaces, none of us really expected the capital M metaverse to ever really happen within the first 12 months. But what we're seeing is that these underpinning technologies that will combine to form the metaverse, they are definitely evolving, and they're starting to mature, and they're starting to cross-pollinate, and they're taking really two forms. And today we're first going to be talking about some of the forms that are consumer-facing, including VR, but also some successful platforms like Roblox and Fortnite. But we're also going to be looking at kind of the other path that some of these technologies have been taking, which is the industrial metaverse. And that includes things like digital twins and prescriptive and predictive modeling. And so we have a lot to cover. And we're hoping to end the discussion at the top of the hour and then leave about 30 minutes for Q&A. So I hope everybody watching will come up with some good questions. Okay, so first, I would like to turn to Jen. Jen at Lionsgate. Really, I would say you guys probably are, out of all the major studios out there, you guys are definitely the ones who have been most active, the most experimental, maybe kind of like the first entrant into some of these experiments. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how did you first start when you started hearing the metaverse word? And you started maybe experimenting with some of these brand activations and that sort of thing. What did you learn? What are some of the mistakes that you made? And how have you sort of refined your thinking since then?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think experiment is a great word to use, because as with any, you know, kind of new technology or new term or new way of engaging with audiences, you are experimenting. You don't really know what's going to work yet. And so for our team, I mean, what we really did is one, listen to our audiences and fans. I think we're really good as a studio about kind of knowing where our fans are. And as someone who works across both the physical and digital mediums, right? Like I build things that exist in real life, but I also oversee all the things that we do that are digital experiences. And so you really have to think about, Gen Z and Gen Alpha audiences and where they're spending the majority of their time. And for us, we know that a lot of that time is being spent online, and it's being spent on platforms like YouTube and Roblox and in Fortnite. And so for us to ignore those spaces means we're not really meeting our fans. And I think the piece for us that's really exciting, and as someone who designs across both, it's really hard in the real world. It's really slow, it's expensive. You can't do all the things you want to do. You have real world constraints, right? In the digital realm, like, we can deliver on things for fans that reality doesn't really matter. And so I think that that's a really exciting opportunity. And so we've done a couple of things. One, we've used that ability to move quickly and to create things that we know fans wanted, but that we couldn't do in real life. And then two, we've tried to blend the opportunity of creating digital and physical experiences. And I think one example of that, and Michael, maybe you can pull up, I have like a quick trailer of sort of the Roblox version of it. But a couple years ago, we created in Roblox a Saw obby. For those of you that don't know what an obby is, it's essentially an obstacle course in Roblox. It's a genre of experience in Roblox. So we had a virtual version of Saw that users could go play. And then in real life, we partnered with Six Flags, and we had haunted houses at Six Flags parks across the country. And it was the first time that someone had done a digital and physical experience at the same time. So you're seeing the digital version. This is just a brief trailer of what the experience looked like. And the cool thing is, while people were waiting in line, and we know that the queues during Halloween can be extraordinarily long, they were playing in Roblox with their friends. And so it was this community building opportunity while they were also in real life. And so I think as a team, like, we've seized the opportunity to sort of transcend between physical and digital, and at the same time, again, be able to create experiences and put people into experiences that we couldn't do in real life. Like, obviously at Six Flags, you're walking through the experience and you're sort of watching, the actors and interactors do their thing. Whereas if you're playing in Roblox, you can actually put yourself through the experience by your avatar, right? And so we were able to give kind of both of those experiences, which is something we couldn't have done in real life. And so we think about stuff like that. And again, I go back to just knowing where audiences are engaging, and the fundamental question of, how is this extending the content for them in a way that's new and exciting? And that's a fundamental question that we always ask before we move forward with anything.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so you kind of went over this fairly quickly, but I just want to make sure for everybody listening, they heard that, at the Six Flags Fright Fests, the queues for the Halloween mazes, people were playing Roblox in the queues, if I'm not mistaken, and then there were QR codes directly.
Yes. Yep.
That would kind of have them scan the QR code, and what would happen exactly? It would give them exclusive in-game items, or
it would take you directly into the Saw experience, and if you played, you could earn UGC, so user generated content. So we gave away, themed Saw and Six Flags backpacks. We also had Xbox come in as a partner and did some unique customized items with them, but you could win Saw accessories for your avatar by playing the experience. And you did it at home, but you could also do it while you were waiting in line. And it's a way to, because we, as great as it was to be across the country with Six Flags, not everybody can make it to a Six Flags park during the season. And so it was amazing to be able to deliver that for anyone around the world at home, right?
Very cool. So let's also talk about Fortnite. And that's another platform that you've done some things with. There was a there's a Saw Halloween activation as part of their Fort Nightmares event.
Yep.
How did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, Billy the Puppet and Saw in general, I think, has just been a favorite during Halloween. And we've done a number of game integrations, but Fort Nightmares has become a really popular and successful experience annually for Fortnite and for Epic. And so we knew that we have a big audience among the Fortnite players. And so, you know, in conversations with Epic, it just made sense to bring Billy into Fortnite. And I think the thing that, you know, we love to do is to interpret the IP in a way that's unexpected for fans. So, you know, literal adaptation isn't that exciting, right? You can watch the movie. And so we were able to create some really unique elements and even a unique version of Billy. If you are a Fortnite player, you may remember we had sort of a helicopter version of Billy. So Billy on his tricycle actually was flying through the air and could drop bombs. And we've just done, not only in Fortnite, but, you know, Dead by Daylight, Rocket League, we've done a lot of really like just fun, playful things with Billy the Puppet and taken him to places that really expand the lore for fans. And so it was a great opportunity to be able to do that. And again, like you think about the digital realm versus the real world, that's not something we ever could have done in the real world. People would never be able to engage with Billy that way, but it was super fun to be able to give them that experience in Fortnite.
That's great. So one of the other questions I had for you is, you know, when you have an IP, like say like a John Wick or something, from both a brand marketing standpoint and also just from like a transmedia storytelling standpoint, how do you decide kind of what goes to LBE and what goes to gaming and online interactivity, and kind of what is the right story to tell for which medium?
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to start with the IP first. And, you know, our team does a lot of work thinking about kind of what are the spaces and places that we could play in with a particular story or world or set of characters. But then fundamentally, it's really important to survey the fans. So the great thing, you know, in today's world is we have access to vast social media. And so we can see what fans are talking about and excited about. And so we listen. And we also do research and really kind of figure out, you know, if we know that a lot of our John Wick fans are also gamers, and we know that they're interested in a John Wick game, that's absolutely something like we have an obligation, I feel like, to our fans to deliver on that aspect of the experience for them. And, you know, we have certain IP that lends itself incredibly well to live stage. So we're bringing the Hunger Games to stage in London. It opens in October of this year. And it's really interesting to think about it, bringing it to stage, because in that environment, we're really going to be able to immerse people in the world, right? In a way that when you're sitting in the theater, you can't do. And so for us, I think I mentioned earlier, you're always sort of asking the question of like, why? Like, what is its purpose for being in this format? What can we deliver through this medium that we can't do through a film or a TV series? So that fundamental question kind of kicks it off. And then we come up with sort of our list of like, these are the possibilities we think about for this IP. And sometimes it's a consumer product. You can probably see I have a Twilight Lego set behind me. And that was actually something we really wanted to do, but it was a fan generated idea. And so I don't know if you're familiar, but like Twilight has just had a massive resurgence, especially on social media. And Lego allows fans to submit ideas. And if they get upvoted to 10,000 votes, they will actually consider turning them into a product. And Twilight was one of the fastest ever upvotes for Lego. And that's a direct example. I say it only because listening to your fans, knowing what they want. So of course, like we were going to say, yes, let's make the Twilight Lego set because fans were demanding it. So I think, you know, it's sort of a twofold approach. Like we have to know, you know, sort of what's in the realm of authenticity and possibility for the IP, you know, why it would deliver something additional beyond sort of the film and television. And then, do fans want this? Is this something that our fan audience is going to embrace and love? And, you know, you ask yourself those three questions and that sets you off on a pretty good path.
Great. Wonderful. So the probably the most recent announcement that has been made is one that may have flown under the radar, which was this new IP deal with Roblox. And I think this is a pretty big This is something we'll probably talk about across all the panelists here, but I think one of the biggest obstacles to getting to the true metaverse and getting kind of like a frictionless way of interacting with these IPs is solving the asset management issue. All of these assets are being created in different 3D modeling software. There aren't necessarily any standards. The interoperability isn't there. But this new announcement that has been made within the ecosystem of Roblox, Roblox has a very robust user-generated content community. And so now this deal allows the users to create experiences with IP that has been essentially signed off on and approved by the licensors. So how did that come together?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've really been an innovator on Roblox, and Roblox knows that. Like, we really embrace working with them to kind of push the envelope. And we're a believer in the creator economy, and a lot of our fans are creators. And so I think, I've seen figures like 61% of Gen Z considers themselves a creator, right? And so when you think about statistics like that, it's really important for us to open up those opportunities. The reality is fans are, and influencers, they're creating all sorts of content, whether we permit them to or not, right? And it's because they love it. And so my whole philosophy is, rather than trying to spend a lot of time and energy enforcing and pushing against it and creating friction with it, like, why not find a way to channel it and embrace it and support it? And so partnering with Roblox to launch this program was really exciting to us, because it gives creators a really easy way on Roblox to just seamlessly approach us and officially use our IP and assets. Again, you can go on Roblox and search for a lot of IP, and a lot of things will come up that are unofficial. And so for us to really, like, to your point, remove the friction and make it as easy as possible for creators to work with us was exciting. And there are over 3 million creators on Roblox developing content, right? And so to harness that power, I mean, as an IP holder, we have Disney on, like, as studios, like, we can only do so much ourselves. But if you can harness the power of that massive creator community, like, what it can do for your content and what it can do for fans is really powerful. And so, we saw it as just a huge opportunity to really, be a leader in that space.
Great, thank you so much. Well, what I wanted to talk about, and then we'll move on to Dawn, is I wanted to talk about how Roblox is not something to scoff at, and it is here to stay. And Roblox currently has over 100 million active users. And actually, this year, Roblox in 2025, actually, this year has surpassed Minecraft and Fortnite to become the #1 game that everyone is playing. And it is the player count is pretty phenomenal. Their daily active users and their VR player share. This is interesting. Now, so in September of 23, Roblox launched for VR. And VR is just a very small percentage of their total user base. But what's interesting is that it has been growing steadily. It launched and only about 20,000 people were using the VR version of Roblox, which is a very, very low number, obviously. In about 18 months, now it's about 120,000. And it has been growing steadily. And by February of next year, it is projected to be at almost 200,000. So interestingly, more and more people are tuning into Roblox in VR. And so with that, we will talk to our next panelist, Dawn. And Dawn, the first question, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Folks, Dawn is the senior art director at Mighty Coconut. Mighty Coconut makes a VR game called Walkabout Mini Golf, which came out in 2021. And Dawn has an extensive history in the themed entertainment community and as a theme park designer. And I think the fact that Walkabout Mini Golf has maintained its success is no accident, and it is partially because of that background that you have. So that's my first question for you is, can you talk a little bit about the overlap in design for mini golf in VR and location-based entertainment?
Well, my background really originated in theme park work for Walt Disney Imagineering. And in the mid-90s, when video games started to go 3D, it seemed obvious to me, but probably only me at the time, that there was an opportunity to adopt the design principles of theme park environmental design to gaming. And so for the last 30 years, I've been doing this weird hybrid career where I've been continuing to work as a freelancer in the theme park world at Disney and Universal and the head of a group, and also the video game world. And when COVID hit, good friends, ex-Imagineers and fellow TEA members, Heidi Hirsch and Karen Thompson and I, survived the lockdown by playing this miniature golf game in VR. And it wasn't very long into it that we went, these guys are kind of doing the stuff we were doing in the theme park world. So I wrote them a fan letter to tell them what a good job they were doing. And 4 years ago, I was hired on as their senior art director. And so Walkabout Mini Golf, we just released, I think, our 38th course. We release 7 to 8 courses a year. Every 7 weeks or so, we come up with a new one. We really are a miniature golf game as a Trojan horse, what we really are doing, which is we're creating really, really story-built, driven virtual environments to connect humans to each other. And we get so many sort of letters thanking us for reconnecting them with their dad, or my brother and I just don't get to see each other very much, but now every Thursday we get together and Walkabout, and we've had people who do their job interviews, or they do job interviews in Walkabout, or people that just go into Walkabout to just chill out because they had a rough day. So for me, it seems like a really obvious connection between the theme park world and the work that we're doing on Walkabout Mini Golf. And it's probably one of my favorite jobs I've ever had, because I kind of get to be a part of the concept end, which is where I normally live as a freelancer, but I also get to wear the hard hat part of being a part of wandering around for the year and a half or so it takes to build each of our courses with the team. And then the last piece is that we have a belief that if we're going to be building something for VR, we should actually be building it in VR. So we really leverage tools like Gravity Sketch and VR Sketch. We use Blender and Unity, and we're constantly meeting inside our projects, even in the earliest gray box and drawn phases, all the way through to release, including play tests where the entire company jumps together and works in the environment while we're designing it.
That's great. So I think you kind of clued into something there, which is that, people are meeting and congregating within the space because there's a fun activity to do. They're having job interviews, or they're just hanging out. I think this is why the previous slide that I showed of, Microsoft Mesh, nobody wants to virtually sit around a conference table in an office building. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's this idea of, let's actually have a fun activity. And I think this maybe is where the themed entertainment community can learn a lot from video games in terms of interactivity and game mechanics. And we're so focused on the built environment and what the guest gets to see. Sometimes we forget to think about what the guest gets to do and what the action is. And so, I was talking to Jen earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. You were telling me that in your Hunger Games Academy Roblox activation, people would just kind of show up and hang out as though they were in school.
Yeah. Essentially, if you saw the last Hunger Games film that came out, it was called Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We introduced the Academy for the first time, and that's essentially like the high school of the capital. And we built it in Roblox, and we built it with, missions and quests, and expecting people to come and sort of do the missions, do the quests, kind of earn, user-generated content, and hang out. But what we didn't expect was for them to create their own uniforms. So we didn't create the Academy uniforms as part of the experience. In retrospect, we now know we should have. but it didn't matter because fans did it themselves. So they would actually dress up in academy uniforms, and after school, they would meet up, much like you would if you were on an actual campus, and they would just hang out. They weren't even coming necessarily to play all the time. They just wanted to socialize in the world that they loved. And so it was really cool to sort of see fans kind of using it for the community building, which I think is such an important aspect of these types of platforms and sort of that metaverse environment.
Absolutely, yeah. And so Don, you've also had the chance to collaborate with a couple of pretty big IPs. You've done Wallace and Gromit as a maze. You've done, I think, an Elvis course. You also had the opportunity to work with Meow Wolf and do sort of like a story extension of, I think it was their Denver location, into a VR mini golf course. So what was that collaboration like?
We're really lucky. We're a quirky little game, and our fan base is some of these IPs, and many of them actually knocked on our door as opposed to us on theirs. I think collaborating with Meow Wolf was probably one of the highlights of my career. We got to work with Katie Kennedy, who was one of the founding artists and art directors. She was the leader for the design of Numina, which is this wild sort of alien swamp interior. And she had been using Gravity Sketch as a tool for designing the actual physical experience. So she jumped right in, and we were elbow to elbow with her as we built it. The other thing is that our virtual worlds work on any headset, including untethered ones. So we have a very low poly aesthetic, almost Lego-like aesthetic. And that has turned out to really allow us to work with IPs with a tremendous amount of freedom, because they know that we're going to be stylistically interpreting their work. So when we were working with the Jim Henson company and we were doing our Labyrinth course, they were really quite chill about how we approached it, because they knew that our interpretation wasn't recreating it, but was an homage to it. And we've been lucky enough that absolutely everybody we've worked with, we're huge fans of those IPs. So it's very easy for us to do our absolute very best to deliver what we feel us as consumers of those IPs would expect and want to experience in a virtual recreation of it.
Awesome. So I want to follow up on one thing that you said quickly about your process. We talked with Jen about how some users within Roblox, now with this new IP licensing platform, users don't really have to worry about asset creation anymore, and they can choose from existing libraries within the platform. But Roblox is very much user-generated content, and Walkabout Mini Golf is very much not user-generated content. It's professionally designed content, and you can tell it's done by real experienced designers. But that also means the content creation process is much harder. So it's less curated for the average person to actually make stuff. So you said that your process is Gravity Sketch into Blender into Unity. And I think something that people may not realize, particularly about putting things into VR, at least for now, maybe this will change in a few years, but you always need to worry about poly count. And this is maybe not something that traditional themed entertainment, like architects who are using Revit, for example, or SketchUp, they're not necessarily thinking about bringing these assets into a real-time environment. So this is kind of a new skill that has to be learned. It's very different to model something for the built environment than it is for a game engine, and especially for VR, which is essentially a mobile phone that's on your head. So can you talk a little bit about that process, about collaborating in Gravity Sketch and then kind of getting those assets into the final product?
Certainly. Well, just to briefly talk about the polygon limitations, especially when you're talking about an untethered headset, the more economical we are in the design of every object means the more objects we can include in an environment. And we like to densely pack our places with stuff. I think a story-driven environment is better if there's lots of eye candy and things for you to discover. So we do build all of our stuff internally, and we have a strict diet of a limit of how many polygons we can have on the screen at any given time. So, and we're constantly beating on that ceiling to try to get things richer and more detailed. But we do have to stick within it. The same is true in the theme park business. is that yes, Revit will allow you to crunch as many polys as you want, but there's a tremendous value in VR to be able to actually meet with colleagues inside the model at any phase of the project, wander around and have basically a virtual site visit. But that can only happen if that model has been economically created. So if you've got a model of a queue space that's going to be built in a theme park and it's 2.5 gigabytes, you can't share it, and you certainly can't walk into it in VR. Now, as far as the collaboration is concerned, at Walkabout, we do design retreats where the founder of the company, Lucas Martel, and the art director team that I'm a part of, we actually meet for 7 days in an Airbnb, and we pretty much craft 7 courses at a time, where we spend all of our time together using the drawing tool to scale to rough out those initial designs that will become the blueprint for the rest of the team to build on as we go. So the gravity sketch is the whiteboard part of that experience. It starts to firm up, and then as things start to get tighter, we'll start bringing it into Blender, where we'll be doing the finished models, and then to Unity to make it something that can be distributed to all the various headsets.
Wonderful. And then Don, the last thing that I want to ask you is one of the things that you said during our preliminary chat is that memory is spatial. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that one of the promises or one of the fears of the metaverse was that we were just going to shed our physical bodies and become, live the good life in this virtual world. And the reality is that's not happened. And we know the difference between a physical experience and a virtual experience, but I think our sort of cave person brains store spatial experiences in the same part of their brain. So if Heidi Hirsch and I decide to play a round of golf, and then we decide to talk for an hour and a half while sitting in a cafe at the top of the Eiffel Tower in one of our courses, our memories are, of course, we weren't actually in Paris when we were having that conversation, but we also remember being in Paris having that conversation. I think that it's more senses to record the experience, and I found that I have very, very rich human interactions that I've had virtually that don't trump an actual trip to Paris, but are enhanced by the fact that I was in these sort of story-driven environments when I had those conversations. Oh, and one other additional thing that I would like to mention about the social aspect of it, fairly early on, we started adding conversation pits and couches and ways in which, above and beyond the golf part, where people would hang out after playing. And we also have what we call rideables. So you can sit on the back of a whale or a sea turtle and have an hour conversation as you're swimming through Atlantis together. And those memories are recorded in that spatial part of your brain where you had a conversation with your friend on the back of a sea turtle about taxes, or whatever.
So what I'm hearing from both you and Jen is that some of the things that we've learned in the past few years, again, as we sort of said at the top, is static environments are just not going to cut it. And we need to use our experience as storytellers and as designers to take what we've learned from, designing these physical experiences to create connections between people with activities and gameplay and interactivity, and bring that into the digital world so that people can actually, have a socially engaging experience, just like they would at a real theme park or real museum or something like that. Folks, so that's one half of the coin. And that is the sort of consumer-facing video game half, but there is a whole separate thing going on in industry. And this is the industrial metaverse. And this is where digital twins come into play. And digital twins are not just static 3D models. Digital twins are full systems that it's a 3D model that has an extra layer of data on top of it that, you can feed data in, you can get data out of it, and you can use it to predict, to simulate, and even to offer prescriptive solutions. Digital twins, they can be used, to find operational efficiencies, but they can also definitely be used for storytelling. And for connecting the digital experience to the physical experience. And that's, I think we all kind of agree that that's sort of the holy grail, is to have that seamless interoperability and connection between the physical twin and the digital twin from an experiential standpoint. So I would like to open it up to Q&A. If folks want to type their questions into the chat. I think we have for this audience in particular, we have a really good question from Courtney Harrison. Are you seeing more collaboration between traditional designers, like show set designers, for example, and digital twin designers? And how do you think those roles will evolve?
We're actually using it a lot in live stage right now, like building on what you're saying, but taking, I mean, because you often don't have access to the theater because there are other shows there and you can't move in. But really working across all the disciplines as you're talking about, and going beyond like previs, but really having the space you're moving into and seeing how the sets are going to work and how you can have efficiencies. And then being able to have everybody kind of jump in and change things and comment. It's like incredibly, incredibly helpful to have that sort of 3D space to work within. And it saves so much money because you can make some mistakes digitally right before you get down the road. But I think live stage is such a slow moving, often more traditional space. And so the fact that we're seeing a lot more of it there, I think is just telling as to where things are heading.
I love this next question that we just got from Dave Elton. With the use of game engines, do you see incorporating game development studios more in the creation of themed entertainment? Or is the physical element of the environment a challenge for game studios to translate their experience as game developers into LBE designers?
I can jump in just because I don't know who's been to the John Wick experience in Las Vegas yet. Thank you to all who've gone. I hope you enjoyed it. But we worked with Behavior Interactive on the game elements for it. Behavior is the game developer behind Dead by Daylight. We've worked with them for a long time on the video game side, and they also now have an LBE division. Thank you for saying it's amazing. I saw that pop up in the chat. But when we were, there's such a blend now between, I mean, when you think about obviously Super Nintendo World at Universal, I mean, it's really, I think, hard to kind of separate spaces often in the way that things are being designed now. And so I say, I would not rule out utilizing game developers, depending on the type of experience you're creating. Obviously, it's not going to be organic to everything, but certainly for things that have interactive elements or gamification elements. I mean, we're unique here at Lionsgate because all of our disciplines sit under one roof when we think about the way we extend beyond film and television. So everything's kind of in my group, which means that the games team is under me. And we bring them in often when we're working on the experiential side, because a lot of the work that we're doing these days involves interactivity and gamification. And so, and vice versa. A lot of our experiential focused team comes in on the gaming side because we're thinking about the user experience. So I think there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, this is a topic that is very close to my own heart, and I often advocate for bringing a game designer onto a team early on a project. And it's worth also pointing out that a game designer and a game developer are not necessarily the same thing. A game developer is more on the software engineering side that will actually build out the product for you, but it's the game designer that really can come in early and should come in early on a project. If it's intended to be an interactive project, you really should bring in a professional game designer. One of the things I like to tell clients is if there's a game that you play with your family and you all have like a lot of fun doing it and you do it often, it's not an accident. It's a well-designed game because professionals designed the game. And understanding things like a core mechanic and a game loop that feels good and is repeatable is something that's really, really important. And that's a skill set that really is brought to the table by a game designer specifically. Having said that, there will be an adjustment that they will have to make because they are often used to designing board games or video games, and they are not thinking about things like throughput considerations. And you can't build infinite number of instances of something because it's all in a hardscaped area. So there definitely is a learning curve, but I absolutely agree that these things are converging and mixing. So that is actually a really good segue into my next question for all of you. For some of the younger people on this call, or those looking to sort of transition into a new chapter of their career, what tools are out there? We've talked about a couple of different tools. We've mentioned Unreal Engine, we've mentioned Gravity Sketch, Blender. What are some tools that you would recommend people start to try their hand at and get better at?
Well, I can start. I draw more today than I've ever drawn in any job I've ever had, despite the fact that I wear a VR headset a certain number of hours every day. I haven't lost that ability to communicate through a drawing. So that would be the first thing I would suggest, drawing. And then my next suggestion would be to be live and understand that all new technology, and if you're a young person, you're going to be exposed to stuff you never imagined would ever exist in your life, and you'll be using it. Selfishly focus on your goal as a storyteller and as a creator of imagery and experience, and grab the tool that does the best job of communicating that goal of yours. And that has served me well. I tend to be an early adopter. I try things and I discard things when they don't live up to their promise. But those handful of things that do, I use all the time. But I'm always looking on the horizon for that next thing that's going to make my job as an art director easier at communicating the design principles to others.
I would just say someone in the comments, said finding tools can be very expensive and time consuming. And how do you do it? I think, when you look at like Blender and Unreal Engine, I mean, some of these tools have free opportunities for you. And so I think you start with them, and then when you sort of figure out what's working for you, then you spend the money and you'll have a depth of experience. But most of them have like entry opportunities that are free.
Yeah, and be careful not to identify yourself with the tool, because that tool might go away. Be live. So I've seen Maya artists, begrudgingly learn Blender and then love Blender, or Blender artists went to 3D Max and then loved it. The language is similar. You have to build new muscle memory to deal with all the shortcuts and keystrokes, but a willingness to be able to jump around and play in lots of different sandboxes is really valuable.
Yeah, for me, the key tool that I've learned is Unity. That's one that's really served me well over the past 10 years. It's really good for prototyping. And I think, we don't have time to do a deep dive on it right now in the next 2 minutes, but it is important to make the distinction that, there are 3D modeling tools like Blender and I guess, Revit and SketchUp, which all have different purposes, but they're in large part for making static objects, static geometry. And then generally, this is a generalization, but it takes code to make those, objects come to life and move and interact. And so in Unity, it integrates really easily with the C# programming language. And in the Unreal Engine, there's a tool called Blueprints that allows you to kind of hook up some functionality and get things going pretty quickly. But I think that is the skill. It is the key difference. Going back to the top of this talk when we talked about that low-hanging fruit of just bringing a 3D model into a VR headset and just leaving it there as a static object is a large reason why the Metaverse bubble burst. And now bringing it to life with interactivity and with that additional layer of data is the key to making enjoyable and repeatable experiences. Great. So my last question for all of you, because we are unfortunately at time, is do you think we will ever get to the true metaverse? And if so, when?
I think if we do, it'll be in hindsight only. I think just like I don't think it's very hard for us to imagine, even if we lived it, what the world was like before cell phones, but there was a world before cell phones. And I think that it's been slower off the ground, but I think we're all using technology like the VR more and more. The VR headset sits on my desk next to my computer, next to my sketchpad. I think of them as equal tools that I use when I need them. I have a feeling that that's how the metaverse is going to sneak into our lives, is through that kind of ubiquitousness, as opposed to necessarily some big moment where we divorce ourselves with the physical world and go live in a virtual one.
I mean, I would say if you think about sort of how do you define it? But if you boil it down to the fact that like it's a world where things are shared and interconnected, then I do, and I hope so, because I just think from a quality of life standpoint for all of us, we all spend so much time online, whether we like it or not, or in virtual environments. And so my hope is that they will start to be more seamless and interconnected and enjoyable experiences.
I think that's a good place to end. On behalf of Ken and Andy and the rest of the TEA Western Division, I want to say a very special thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for sharing your subject matter expertise. And hopefully you've given this audience a lot to think about. The education series will continue. We'll do this again. I believe there is a part 2 of this series coming with Kathleen Cohen that is TBD, but that will be scheduled and everybody will be finding out about that. Thank you to everyone who showed up, and I'll see you all in the metaverse.